Good evening. My name is Tamara Kenworthy, and I am a member of the Des Moines AM Rotary Club here in Des Moines, and also a member of the multi-club committee of the Greater Des Moines Rotary Clubs. And it's my pleasure to welcome all of you here this evening to our annual Civitas event. As you know, our topic this year is on substance abuse. We want to learn from all of the local heroes that we have in our community that are doing so much to help others that are dealing with this issue. So we know we have a great program for you this evening. Our speakers have graciously volunteered to be in person this evening while you're all nesting at home so that our program will run seamlessly. We assure you that we are practicing all of the social protocols that we should with social distancing and taking seriously those protocols. We want to thanks to Remax Concepts for our space this evening and allowing us to spread out and bring the program to you. So in Rotary fashion, we'd like to have a brief invocation this evening, so if you could please bow your heads. As we gather here today in Rotary Fellowship to discuss a very important issue that is impacting so many in our communities, let us be ever mindful of opportunities to render our service to fellow citizens and to our community. 2020 has been a very challenging year across the world, and thus has increased the numbers of individuals and families dealing with mental health issues and substance abuse. Tonight, let us open our minds and our hearts to how we can each and collectively play a role in making our community a better place for everyone. Amen. And also, with every Rotary meeting, we pay tribute to our American flag, a symbol of our great country and the veterans who have risked their lives for all of us. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance as we salute the flag on the screen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The Civitas Committee is made up of a variety of members from each of our sponsoring Rotary clubs throughout the Metro, and you can see them listed on our screen this evening. We'd like to thank all of the Metro clubs for sponsoring this event, as well as L.M.H.C. Insurance, who is our promotional and print sponsor. In 2014, we began the tradition of holding this annual event, a multi-club event, focused on an important issue in our communities or in the world. All of our net proceeds from the event go to local nonprofits who are actually working in the area of the topic of our program each evening. We're so proud of our program. In 2014, we donated $5,200 split across Polio Plus, Outreach Incorporated, and the Food Bank of Iowa. In 2016, we donated $6,000 to a Rotary Global Water Project. In 2018, we donated $4,200 across 7 local nonprofits working in the area of mental health. And in 2019, we donated $4,750 to 19 nonprofits working in the area of hunger. So our goal this year is we really want to beat what we've pledged each year past. Our goal is $7,500 this year. So far, we have $5,000 pledged, so we're asking you tonight to help us beat our past numbers and join us in financially assisting the local nonprofits who are working in the area of substance abuse. At the bottom of your screen is the link where you can donate to the GoFundMe page. So now on with our program. Between each of our panelists, we will be sharing several short videos from local nonprofits featuring the work that they do in the area of substance abuse. If you have questions this evening, please jot them into the chat box on the YouTube channel, and we will be fielding those questions. We are holding all questions until after all of our speakers tonight, and then we will do the Q&A session at the very end. So now here is Rotarian Mike Lewis, who is going to introduce our MC and keynote speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. I appreciate the kind words tonight and getting us started. It is my pleasure this evening to be with everyone and introduce our panelists and our keynote speaker. Quite frankly, without the panelists that are sitting here today, this event wouldn't be possible. So I'd like to thank each and every one of you as we get started. I want to share a few brief comments about Dale Woolery, his background, and the engagement that he's had with our committee. In January of 2019, Governor Kim Reynolds appointed Dale Woolery as his 8th director of the Governor's Office of Drug Control Policy. Dale joined the office in 1994, and he has worked with public and private sector leaders, and he is engaged with federal level, local, state levels to strengthen drug control efforts within our community and in the area. In addition to the strategic coordination of the drug control efforts and substance abuse prevention, Dale is also involved in treatment initiatives throughout Iowa, representing the governor's office. As a former broadcast manager and journalist in Des Moines, Dale is a graduate of Drake University. He also graduated from Missouri with a bachelor's degree in journalism. In the 6 months ago, Dale worked with our group to start this initiative and this discussion this evening. He has tirelessly supported this effort. I want to thank you, Dale, for your participation along with others. When the subject of substance abuse first came up on the radar for our group and committee, Dale told us that he would be more than happy to participate in this effort and do whatever it took to bring this forward to you tonight. Again, thank you, Dale, for your participation. Obviously, doing a virtual event is a little bit different for our group. Tamara outlined the number of events that we've had since 2014, and this is the first time that we've held this event virtually. Ultimately, we're here to raise awareness on the importance of the subject of substance abuse, creating a better long-term solution for Rotarians and how we can be active in the community to promote well-being. So with that, Dale, I would like to welcome you and the panelists to the room. Thank you, sir.
Mike, thank you.
Thank you. I'll sneak by this way so we don't cross paths.
And I appreciate the precautions on social distancing and the masking that's going on. These are truly unique times, and we're all off schedule. I know I'm off schedule. I haven't found anybody who's on schedule, so really, really appreciate the invitation to be here and the fact that you've accommodated us in this way. I'm really no subject matter expert, and actually, as you said, I'm an old radio guy, not a TV guy, so I'm not sure where the camera's at or what's going on so much, but I can talk, sometimes anyway. What I want to do right now is introduce you to the panelists, the subject matter experts who are here tonight, and just briefly, and then they'll be telling you more here in a little bit once I've provided an overview. To my far right, we have Sheriff Kevin Schneider of the Polk County Sheriff's Office, and he'll be able to address law enforcement perspectives on the issue of substance use and mental health disorders. And then to my immediate right, we have Christopher Patterson, and he is with the Judicial branch. And so he can come at this from the perspective of the courts and all things justice related. He's here in the 5th Judicial District. To my immediate left, we have Christopher Marks. This Christopher, as opposed to this Christopher, is a counselor, a therapist, and practices in substance use disorder treatment. So that's the help that a growing number of Iowans, frankly, need and thankfully are getting from people like Christopher and his colleagues. And then to my far left, Stephen Quirk is going to talk about child welfare issues related to substance use disorders or substance use and some of the mental health issues related. He's with Lutheran Services of Iowa. And so I feel privileged to be with these 4 subject matter experts and look forward to their comments as well. What I'm going to do first momentarily is provide an overview. And so I'll be giving you some statistics and kind of set the stage, if you will. I'll be setting the table as the leadoff hitter, and then we'll have other hitters. Finally, Stephen will be the cleanup hitter, and then we'll get to questions and answers a little later on. Do want to thank Mike, Tamara, and Mia, who helped to organize this and invited us to be here. It's a great opportunity, and one of the things that we need to do is to help educate and raise awareness. So I'm going to move a little bit, and we're going to look at some slides, and this will allow me to kind of follow along, and Jason's going to help. So first of all, what I'd like to do is highlight 3 of the areas where we're seeing a lot of change right now in the areas of substance use in Iowa. A lot more products, different formulations, a lot stronger products. The potency is not what it was 20, 10, 5 years ago. And then finally, the laws are changing. Now, none of this is new, but it seems to me that we're seeing more rapid change on a broader scale. Next, Jason, please. For some context, and I want to do this because the message I would have is a balanced message. We have a great deal of need, but we also are making a good amount of progress. And service clubs like yours, the Rotaries of Iowa, do a lot of good work in this area and can be a huge help, as can other service clubs. But as you can see here, and I don't want to be reading slides, we're better off than other states in some areas, not so well off in other areas. And so our areas of challenge, if you start breaking it out by substance type, are in the area of alcohol, tobacco or nicotine, and also methamphetamine. Those are the hot flashpoints as we look at them based on data indicators. Here's a couple of slides that give you an idea of how things have been going over the last 10, 15 years. On the left, that gives you an idea of how many Iowans are going into substance use disorder treatment for help based on their substance of need. You can see progress on the alcohol front, pretty much level on everything else, some reductions, except for the glowing line there, which represents methamphetamine use disorder or addiction. That is rising rather significantly. On the right, we're looking at youth in Iowa. So these are preteens and teens who take a survey, and you can see they're using less alcohol, less tobacco, but vaping has taken off. So in some ways, they've traded the old tobacco of cigarettes for the new tobacco of e-cigarettes and vaping. Drug overdoses are something we're watching, and frankly, until the opioid epidemic, we weren't tracking that closely. But with the opioid epidemic, we are, and we're seeing a lot more of that, and also stimulant overdose deaths. We are at a relatively low point compared to other states in sheer numbers. But as you can see here, we have now a rather rapid rate of increase in drug overdose deaths. That's not accounting for all overdoses, only those in which we have a tragic death. And so 35-36% rate of increase most recently. How much of that is attributable in the last few months to the pandemic? We can speculate, but I would suspect that there is some correlation, just don't know how much. So breaking out our overdose deaths by substance, the big 3 are alcohol, opioids, and psychostimulants, which is code for methamphetamine and other stimulants, but primarily meth. You can see here alcohol dwarfs everything else when you look at alcohol-related deaths. This is a story that needs to get out. We need to know this, and we need to be working on it. The other 2 are overdoses. So there's a difference here between overdosing and other types of deaths, but we're seeing an increase in the opioid overdose deaths currently. Psychostimulant overdose deaths up just a little bit. I want to show you some other impacts from substance use and misuse. Traffic fatalities. We are getting better, though we're not very good at looking for, detecting, and understanding just how impaired some drivers might be, not only on alcohol, but other drugs. And as we get better at that, we find more. The more we look, the more we find, and we think there's some actual increase too. But the end result is we're seeing more impairment on the roadways, and much more of it because of drugs, sometimes mixed with alcohol and sometimes with no alcohol. On the child welfare front, this is what Stephen will speak to a little later on. These are what are known as drug-endangered children cases, which would involve, could involve a removal or some kind of a proceeding to determine the status of children who might be in a drug environment. It could be, 10, 15 years ago, it could have been meth manufacturing. These days, it might be drug use, it could be drug dealing, or some kind of drug activity. Moral of the story, a lot of young children, many very young, can't fend for themselves, are being exposed to risky situations. Prison admissions. This is important because in the era of the social justice movement and the pandemic are teaching us that there are new ways, different ways, alternatives to incarceration for some who might otherwise be convicting a crime under our current laws. For taxpayers, this is important because prisons are expensive. Public safety is at issue too, as far as who belongs in prison, who belongs in the community. As you can see here, methamphetamine and methamphetamine-related crimes are a big driver of prison admissions in the state of Iowa. Drugs also impact the workplace. A lot of Iowa employers drug test. This is a sampling of those who do, and you can see that in 2018, meth was #1 on the hit list here, followed by marijuana. Marijuana used to be #1, but a couple of things are happening. As laws change, employers, I believe, are changing policies, and so the testing regimen may be changing. At any rate, you can see that these substances are the ones that are found most often as employers test. So on the subject of marijuana, this tells you a lot. These are state marijuana laws around our nation, and it's a patchwork, it's a quilt work. We have all sorts of variations of the theme. Fully legal, fully illegal, some with full medical, some with partial medical. That would be Iowa, where we have the limited CBD law, medical cannabidiol law. And then you have some that have decriminalized, and there are varying degrees of decriminalization to full decriminalization to meet the definition to partial. But you can see up in the upper right corner, 14 of the 15 states with the highest past year usage rates now have either legalized or decriminalized. So I think the use precedes the laws, and it's not settled yet where this country is going. The federal law remains that marijuana is a Schedule I controlled substance and illegal. Here are the latest statistics on marijuana use. And interestingly, while we've seen an increase over the last 4 years in all age groups, the big driver here, it's adults. It's the older adults who are showing the largest increase. So people my age on down, things have changed since I was young and at the left there. But anyway, a lot of changes going on here. In Iowa, we actually have one of the lowest rates of marijuana use, current marijuana use, in the nation. I say current because a lot of people will experiment, but most people don't continue using. And this is one of the well-kept secrets that I think should not be a secret. We have to understand that marijuana today is not yesterday's marijuana. It's changing about as frequently as the guidance on our pandemic. The potency of the THC levels, THC being the main psychoactive ingredient in marijuana, tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, in the concentrates, these are the new marijuana formulations that involve oils waxes, and the edibles, foods and drinks that can be infused with THC. Those levels now are about 61% in the U.S. as of 2 years ago, on average. There are some places where you can get nearly 100% THC. That's far cry from what was around 10, 20, 30 years ago. And we don't yet have the science to tell us what that really means. But intuitively, I think for me, we want to exercise caution when we start looking at changing laws, realizing that behind the scenes, the potency on the stuff we're talking about is much different. These are just some examples, visual examples of what we mean by marijuana concentrates. It's taking the plant material or the weed and synthesizing it to come up with products like this that can be vaped. So let's turn to methamphetamine. We've made great progress on meth labs. They're almost non-existent now. However, if you look at the next slide, the cartels of Mexico are making up for the loss. Purity in Iowa of methamphetamine as high as it's ever been. Treatment admissions, people who need help for addiction or meth use disorder, highest level ever. And if you look nationally, what we've been seeing here in Iowa is now being seen across the country. Overdose deaths related to meth, amounts of drugs seized because of meth or involving meth. That photo there was just from last week in L.A., the largest meth seizure in U.S. history, over a ton, based on one single law enforcement seizure. On the opioid front, most who misuse opioids start with prescription painkillers. There are basically three types of opioids, as I think of it. Prescription pain meds, your illicit organic drugs like heroin, and then your illicit synthetic drugs like non-pharmaceutical fentanyl and fentanyl analogs or knockoffs. And there's been a kind of a succession in the use of those, and we're kind of now in the synthetic illegal fentanyl stage, and it gets more potent as you go. And so we're seeing more lethal substances. This shows you what I'm talking about. Carfentanyl's 10,000 times more potent than morphine or heroin. The point is, oftentimes people don't know what they're taking, and now in the pandemic, people have been taking different substances. That may have something to do with our increase in overdoses and overdose deaths because everybody is off schedule, and that includes some of the suppliers of drugs as well as some of the consumers of drugs. For the response to the opioid epidemic, several tools have been put into place. Naloxone is an overdose rescue drug for opioid overdoses, only for opioids. And its use has increased dramatically, primarily by first responders, EMS in particular. Lower right there, it shows locations for medication-assisted treatment. MAT, as we know it, it's an opioid addiction treatment regimen involving medication. We had a third of what we have now as far as prescribers in the state. We still don't have nearly enough. You can see a lot of space there where Iowans who need help are going to have to travel or figure out how they get their medication-assisted treatment. But this is part of what's needed to treat opioid addiction. And then in the lower left here, there's basically a flyer that talks about Iowa's Good Samaritan Law. That means if you're at a party, you've done something you shouldn't have done, maybe you use something illegal, a friend overdoses, if you stay there and help authorities and call 911, you won't be prosecuted. So we're trying to incentivize Iowans to call for help instead of running and hiding and being afraid that they'll get arrested and prosecuted. You know, there's some fine print on this, but this is an important tool. Unfortunately, I've yet to find anybody who knows anybody who's made use of this. So I'm going to keep asking until I find someone. We need to publicize this. Iowa families and friends need to know that we have a Good Samaritan program. Call 911 and get help. Prescription drug take-back programs are a way that virtually all of us can help. So we don't have to rely on subject matter experts like those we have here tonight. We can all do this. And this Saturday is the next National Prescription Drug Take-Back Day. So Saturday, October 24th from 10 to 2, probably 100 or so sites around the state of Iowa, there will be special operations to collect and safely remove prescription medications or medications of any kind, no questions asked, and I think they're all going to be practicing precautions as far as COVID-19 is concerned. Many will be drive-through, no contact. So it's a great opportunity to clean up your house and help the cause by preventing the diversion of prescription drugs and therefore the misuse and perhaps addiction to them. And you're also helping the environment. We have nearly 400 of these sites year-round, permanently in law enforcement centers and in pharmacies around Iowa. And then twice a year we do this one-day event that the DEA sponsors nationally. Tons of medications get collected. So that's one way we can all help. And I'm winding down here, and I apologize. The sheriff's already on me for taking too much time. Again, context. Things are not going to heck in a handbasket, period. Yeah, we have challenges, but we've also made progress. We're not in the drug eradication business. We are in the risk reduction business. And over the last 40 plus years, we've actually seen good progress on a few fronts. And that's really important, especially as it relates to, in this case, 12th graders, so youth. You know, vaping is one of the newer areas for youth that we're going to have to do something more about. We need to tamp that down, and we need to continue to get these trend lines going down. And that means a lot of good community work and work by families and also service groups like the Rotary. Finally, what has the pandemic done to everything? I'm not going to read through all of this, but just a few things. We're seeing excessive drinking in Iowa. We have more drug overdose deaths. We've actually heard about more medications being stockpiled because people haven't been getting out. So Saturday's a great opportunity to get rid of that stuff. We saw initially a drop in fatal traffic crashes, which means we think a drop in drug-impaired driving, but everything seems to be back to the way it used to be now. Same thing with meth supplies. The cartels didn't send as much meth into the U.S. in the beginning of the pandemic. Now they've reopened for business. Telehealth is something that for the future I think we'll watch. I was talking with one of the Christophers here earlier. What's the role for telehealth going forward? Access, especially in rural areas, it's proving to help with that. The effectiveness remains to be seen. Again, I think you're going to see a larger role for telehealth going forward, post-pandemic, but details to be determined. Also, community supervision of drug-addicted offenders. We're seeing many fewer in prison now. We're seeing many more in the community. That means more community supervision, more community treatment. If in going through this we find that the crime rate is unchanged, that signals that there's a different way to do business. And so we're always looking for new and more effective ways, and therefore alternatives to incarceration for eligible individuals with the right help provided in many cases, so a la diversion to treatment instead of the sheriff's jail, if you meet the criteria laid out by local officials. I think we're going to see more of that. We have a pilot right now in 3 counties doing diversion to treatment, and we're actually enthused that this may show us a way forward as far as additional options in addition to current efforts. And finally, what can all of us do to help? In the home, educate. Talking and listening is one of the most important things we can do when it comes to young people. I no longer have young children, but I have young grandchildren. And whether they want to hear me or not, I think it's important that we set expectations, talk about healthy choices, because research shows that teenagers who learn at home about the risks of drugs are up to 50% less likely to use, and a fear of disappointing parents is one of the main motivators of teenagers who choose not to use drugs. That's not an inoculation. There is no such thing, but it reduces the odds. That's what we can all do individually. We can also intervene when someone needs help. So, there are local providers you can plug into. The YourLifeIowa.org is a statewide helpline. It's a website, text line, phone line. There are places to go and get help, and that's true in schools and in businesses as well. If you see something that doesn't look right, report suspicious activity to local law enforcement. One thing I hear from our friends in law enforcement is that sometimes people will run into them and say, oh, I was thinking about calling you 2 weeks ago. I saw somebody doing something. Well, 2 weeks later probably isn't going to help when it comes to investigation. But if you see it now and you call, you never know if you're the first or last piece of a potential puzzle that you can help solve. And then finally, get involved in activities like this one tonight. This is an awareness-raising type of event. I applaud you for it. Taking back medicines at take-back events, Good Samaritan, promote that, and organize other community events. I think the more we understand, the more likely we are to be successful in our evolving response. And with that, I will be quiet now, and I hope that you will stay safe and look forward to questions later on. So at this point, or at least coming up next, stay tuned, and we're going to go to the sheriff now. All right, so without further ado, Sheriff Kevin Schneider of the Polk County Sheriff's Office is next.
Thanks, Dale. Thanks, folks, for having me here tonight. And I give Dale a little bit of abuse. I told him he could talk all the time if he wanted to, because I've worked with Dale for probably close to 40 years. And at one point in time, I had hair halfway down my back, a beard clear down to underneath my chin, and was working undercover narcotics. And that's when I first met Dale. But just to give you an idea, the Sheriff's Office is a unique law enforcement agency. And the reason I say that is a lot of folks don't know everything that we do. The Sheriff's Office patrols 574 square miles here in Polk County. We also have a criminal investigation division. We have a narcotics division. We have detectives that are assigned to the FBI task force, also to the U.S. Marshal Services, and we also have a sex offender team that goes out and works with the Marshal Services and makes sure that the sex offenders are staying in compliance. We also work with, like Dale mentioned, the drug endangered children. We have a DEC program, and so it's the Sheriff's Office does that on the patrol side. We respond to calls like every other agency. We also have every different type of call that you can imagine. We also have the job of carrying out court orders, which are issued by the judge. And many of those court orders have to do with removing children from a residence. And we remove children that are either involved in maybe a domestic situation, or it's a drug-endangered child situation, and we move those youngsters to a safe place, make sure that gets done. The Sheriff's Office has that, whereas no other law enforcement agency has that responsibility to carry out the judge's court order. We also get the duty of housing folks. So we have one of the largest holding facilities in the state of Iowa. We run about 1,000 inmates a day. So the only one bigger than us is when they're full capacity is Fort Dodge. So we stay very busy. And like Dale talked about, diversion programs. And I'll touch on that because it's important. We don't need any new customers. We have plenty. We don't need any more. And if we can find a way to help people instead of just putting them in jail, that's our ultimate goal. And that may be where the Rotarians come in and are able to do something like that. Maybe to support a program of their choice, have their own, whatever the case may be. It seems like oftentimes private groups can get a lot more accomplished than when the government gets involved and they stand in there and we try to make things work smoothly, because sometimes that becomes a little bit more difficult. But we also have a unique group of folks that a lot of you don't hear about, and that's the way we like it. It's the Mid-Iowa Narcotics Enforcement Task Force. And this is sponsored and basically supported by the Sheriff's Office, and there's 16 other agencies involved in this in and around the metro. So if you live in Des Moines, there's a Des Moines officer or two on this task force. If you're out in West Des Moines, there's a couple officers on the task force. Urbandale, Altoona. So everybody pools the resources together to get the job done. Substance abuse touches every facet of law enforcement, whether it's somebody who's chemically dependent on alcohol or as somebody who's using illegal drugs. Our officers come in contact with that every day, somewhere, somehow. And you'd be amazed at how it affects the young folks. And it may be the simple fact that that's what mom and dad are fighting about, and that's the reason that the police were called, because they're fighting about issues like that at home. So the Sheriff's Office has those. We have a priority of trying to get those folks help. We do everything that we can to get those folks help and get them in a treatment program. We have 4 officers that are assigned to nothing but mental health. These officers are going out, picking folks up, getting them to their court hearing or getting them in their treatment facility, making sure they get where they need to go so they can get some help. The problem with a lot of folks in mental health, if you haven't experienced it, folks that have a mental illness often do what they're supposed to do. They take their medicine and they get feeling better. And it's not like when you have a cold, you quit taking your medicine. A lot of them either misuse the medicine or quit taking it because they feel better, and then it's a vicious cycle for them. So the Sheriff's Office has the responsibility to make sure those folks get where they need to go. But just to give you an idea of what the Mid-Iowa Narcotics Task Force, it started in 2002, so they've been around for a while, and it's kind of nice to be able to keep something that's been around that long flying under the radar, because they're doing a good job. But they address street-level drugs, and their job is to try and dismantle and interrupt organized crime. And there is organized crime in drugs, a lot of it. I-35 and I-80 are the crossroads of the United States. We see a lot of trafficking back and forth. So that keeps us very, very busy. But we have 16 state, county, local officers involved, as well as we work hand in hand with the DEA and the FBI. The FBI also has a program called Safe Streets. We have officers assigned to that task force, and that also encounters the drugs that go on in your neighborhood. So if you think there's something going on in your neighborhood that's not quite right, like Dale said, make the call. We'll come out, you pay your tax dollars. There's no wasted call to 911. We can come out and take care of it. The only calls that we don't get are the ones that are wasted. So we also partner with the National Guard on this task force. They supply resources, intelligent officers, equipment. So it's nice to have that as well, and it makes them very successful. Polk County Sheriff's Offices have committed a captain, sergeant, 2 detectives, and administrative assistant to this task force full time. That is all they do, is work narcotics, drugs, and go out there and work from street level all the way up to the organized crime. Every agency that is involved in this task force helps fund the agency by giving us personnel, by having an officer assigned. So, and also we receive federal funding from the Burn JAG grants, which are administered by Dale's office, and so we are successful and continue to keep getting those grants from the federal government. So, just to give you an idea, we think Des Moines is a nice, quiet place, and it is, in perspective. But over the years that the task force has been around, 674.5 pounds of crack cocaine, 8,850 pounds of marijuana, 1,100 pounds of methamphetamine, $19 million and some change in seized illegal funds. This is the money that we have seized from the drug dealers. This is the kind of business we're talking about. 19 million. And I can tell you it's higher today than it was last week. It goes up every day. We've also taken, with drugs and narcotics goes firearms. We've seized over 2,000, almost 2,100 illegal firearms or firearms that were being used in the criminal enterprise there when they're protecting their drugs or their safe house. And over 1,000 vehicles, about 1,050 vehicles have been seized. A lot of people ask, well, what do we do with all that? Obviously, we have to destroy the drugs. The money is forfeited through the court systems, and it's used to help fund the operation so that the taxpayers are not the only ones paying for this operation out there. The drug dealers are helping catch themselves. So we appreciate that. So, and it is, illegal narcotics have been found in about every place you can think of in central Iowa. And it's not just the people that are the criminals. We have professionals. We have people in all walks of life that are involved in this operation. Dale talked about progress. I think we're making progress. Some days it seems like we're not, but we're always plenty busy, and we always have no shortage of work, which is someday we'd like to be able to have nothing to do when it comes to illegal narcotics. That would be great. So the Mind Task Force is a leading edge of law enforcement, and he talked about fentanyl. Fentanyl is something that is kind of like the COVID. It is so hazardous that there have been officers that have came in contact with this drug in a car, never even touched it, but been there and had to be treated in the emergency room just because of the contact that's in the air. So that, between that and the heroin, we see a huge increase. And like Dale was talking about, the borders, when they were kind of shut down because of the COVID, the drugs slowed down a little bit. They have picked right back up where they left off, and it's business as usual. And so somebody's making a lot of money. The methamphetamine, back when I was working narcotics, was being made in the farm fields, and it's almost cheaper now for them to bring it in from Mexico than it is to try and produce it themselves here. With the work that the farmers have done, the Farm Bureau, as far as locking the anhydrous tanks, those kind of things, it has slowed that business down quite a bit. So the Mine Task Force responds to all the metro. They get called out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there's always somebody on call responding. So it's a busy group of people. And a lot of people said, why don't we just legalize it? Why don't we just legalize marijuana? It'd cut down on a lot of our problems. And you know, I'm not here to tell you one way or the other what my personal feelings are. My job is to do what the law says. But just to give you an idea, here's just a couple of the statistics from Colorado. They had a 5-year study, so they've been legal out there for about 5 years. So when it's talking about traffic fatalities, and that affects all of us, each and every one of us, because we're all driving on the roads. We may not all be using marijuana while we're driving or out there on the roads, but we're out there. Somebody else may be. In 2013, traffic deaths, which tested positive, increased 135% in Colorado. 24% increase in all traffic deaths. Since marijuana was legalized, traffic involving drivers who tested positive has more than doubled in 2013. 129 people were killed in 2019. 55 before that, 129, more than doubled. It equates to a person killed every 3.5 days. So you ask yourself, should we legalize marijuana? I don't know. Even if we're not a user, we can still be a victim. That's pretty scary. And everybody says, well, it's a good tax revenue. We get a lot of money in there. Our priority, and I know the Rotarians' priority is family, children, being professional. Marijuana, ages 12 and older, increased 30%. This is in Colorado, since it became legal. Increased 30%. Because it's in the house just like peanut butter and jelly. That's 76% higher than the national average. 18 and older has increased 19% and is 73% higher than the national average. College-age marijuana has increased 6% and is 50% higher than the national average. And in the past month, youth marijuana decreased 25% and is still 43% higher than the national average. A lot of things for us to think about. A lot of things that we can hopefully have an influence with our legislators, with our lawmakers, and so forth. But we talk about social impact. We talk about finances. Everybody says marijuana, the tax money, was going to be the answer all to our budget problems. Marijuana tax revenue represents approximately 0.85% of Colorado's budget. 0.85, less than 1%. 67% of all the local jurisdictions in Colorado have now banned businesses selling recreational medical marijuana. 67%. They're learning something out there, and hopefully we can learn from them, but it's something that a lot of us will have to experience before we make our decision here in Iowa. And I'm not saying good or bad. I'm saying that it's just the stats that are talking about it over the last 5 years. They're learning something from it. They're having a huge problem. And you think, well, if we legalize it, then we'll have no more crime. We'll have no more illegal sales. Their illegal sales are up more than they were before because people don't want to do what they need to do to go buy it properly. And then you have a black market. People coming in trying to control the legal sales. So it's kind of goes back to the old bootleg days. When there was no booze, there was no problem. Well, that's not true. It was all being bootlegged and done illegally, under the table, in the back rooms, so forth, and somebody was getting rich off of it. So think about that when somebody asks that. Like I said, I'll stand behind the law, whatever the lawmakers choose to do, and my job is to uphold the law, and we'll do that. And it makes it tough when you have these kind of stats and everybody thinks it's good because we don't hear the bad side of it. But that's available, and that is, I think, online. You can get that online from Colorado, from the state of Colorado. The sheriff also, like I talked about, has the jail. We have a partner that we work with, and that's Bridges. Bridges does a treatment program, and we actually rent them space in the jail. They have a whole wing of the jail that is separate from the jail. You can't get there through the jail. You have to go out and around. But they are working with inmates and have a very good success rate out there. And that is privately funded, folks. They do get a little bit money from the Burn Jag grant and from the state. But it was headed up by some local business folks. Some of you would probably know who they were if I told you. They got this thing up and going, helping people. Because substance abuse touched their family. And I think we all know that substance abuse has probably touched our family in some aspect. So keep that in mind. Do everything you can to help. And we will be out this weekend, picking up any extra drugs that you might have at home that you don't know what to do with. Don't contaminate our waterways by flushing them down the toilet. Bring them to us. We'll destroy them. And it's going to be a drive up. You don't have any contact. You can drop them in a bucket. The officers will take them. And we'll see that they get where they need to go. So, again, thanks for having me. Thanks for putting this program together. And like I said, I can't touch Dale with his knowledge, but he sure is a good partner to work with. So thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Gwen Babrell with Children and Families of Iowa. I'm the Clinical Director of Behavioral Health Services. At Children and Families of Iowa, through our behavioral health services, we provide counseling and therapy services at 3 different locations in the Des Moines area. We provide therapy and counseling services to individuals birthed through their lifespan. We serve individuals with a wide variety of needs, including those who've experienced transitions, losses, and other personal experiences with stress or adjustments. An area of specialty for our agency is substance abuse counseling, and in these services we're able to meet the needs and address an individual's needs who has been struggling with substance abuse issues, but also provide family-focused services to provide support and counseling to individuals who are impacted by their loved one's substance use. This might include parents, significant others, or children of the individual who is struggling with substance use. Now more than ever at Children and Families of Iowa, we recognize the importance of our services. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the practice of social distancing, we recognize that the isolation that individuals feel has only exacerbated the symptoms or risks to individuals struggling with substance use, as well as their family. So during this time, we have greatly expanded our services to include teletherapy services. Those teletherapy services include individual, family, couples, and group sessions for not only the individual struggling with substance use, but also their family and loved ones.
The District Court Administrator for the 5th Judicial District of Iowa. The 5th Judicial District of Iowa is comprised of Polk County and 15 surrounding counties. I have the pleasure of being in charge of all of the non-judicial functions of the courts in the area. And I must tell you, I'm super excited to be here with you this evening to talk a little bit about the courts, to talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on in our society. I'm super excited about some of the social justice movement that is underway, and in particular about some of the discussions that are now being held about criminal justice reform. You may be aware that for about the almost 50 years now, our country has embraced a, quote, war on drugs. That was first announced by President Richard Nixon back in 1971. Since that time, our country has undergone a tremendous transformation. The country went from a kind of a middle-of-the-pack country to actually leading the entire world in incarceration rate in just under 20, 30 years, since from the time that that announcement was made in 1971 to the early 90s, we led the world in incarceration. And a lot of it had to do with many of the policies that were adopted in terms of the laws that were adopted, and in terms of, because those laws were on the books, they were enforced by the courts. And so we saw an exponential increase in the number of incarcerated persons. And the fact that the incarceration rate increased at a time when substance abuse also increased is not a coincidence. It is well documented that our incarceration rate was largely powered or driven by an increase in the enforcement of drugs and substance abuse and alcohol-related offenses. And so over the course of time, the courts, we have really struggled with what our role, if any, should be. Should we remain in a box to just strictly enforcing the laws that were on the book? So when an individual came before the courts charged with a substance abuse offense or drug-related offense, that the court's role in that was simply to mete out a sentence, impose a sentence. It's already been discussed by both Dale and by the sheriff that when an individual member of society is incarcerated, there is a social cost to that. There's a very real social cost to that in terms of that individual's family, in terms of that individual and their contribution to the greater society, to our economy, etc. So it's not necessarily a good thing in terms of the way that we have approached or our substance abuse issue within the United States. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what the courts, and I will call out a particular jurisdiction in my hometown of Miami, Florida. The county there is Dade County. And in the late 80s, Dade County was the first jurisdiction to embrace drug courts. And this was at a time when, again, that argument was still ablaze about what is the court's role with regards to helping or adjudicating substance abuse cases or cases involving substance abuse. And there they took the approach. Again, this was very against the grain in terms of what the rest of the country was doing. But they took the approach that they would try what is called problem solving or therapeutic justice. We're going to get away from just simply handing out sentences because we see where that's going. And where that was going was individuals were being sentenced to jail or to prison only to return to society without the appropriate coping strategies or coping mechanisms, without the appropriate interventions that help steer them away from the substances. So they would return only to get involved or continue in their drug use. And so in Miami, Florida, they decided to give another model a shot. The court took a very different approach. The court, instead of doing the familiar thing, the court partnered with a number of other agencies. And so in order to develop a multidisciplinary approach to addressing some of the substance abuse issues. So they partnered with, for an example, the substance abuse community. They partnered with the prosecuting attorney. They partnered with a number of social services entities in order to develop what we now know and has come to be known as drug courts. And Dale touched upon this earlier, and in his presentation, he alluded to the fact that the drug court model is beginning to have real impact here locally. And I'll speak to that a little bit in depth a little bit later. But I just want to introduce the concept of drug courts. Because drug courts, as opposed to sending an individual into incarceration, jail, or prison, it allows the person to remain in the community. It allows the person to continue to work. It allows the person to continue to support his or her family, to interact with his or her family, raise children, and potentially be a positive asset to our society, as opposed to a drain. And it's probably not the best way to put that. But in saying drain, what I mean by that in particular is that statistics show that it costs American taxpayers just under $40,000 per year to incarcerate an individual in prison. So from that standpoint, I mean a drain, not necessarily the individual is a drain or is not. So I just wanted to clarify that. But it's a drain in the sense that that is money that we could have otherwise took and put into something else. Another squad car for the sheriff, or better resources for our kids, playgrounds, just a lot of different things that we could use that money for, as opposed to incarcerating someone only to see that person come out of jail and go back into the a life of criminality because they have not developed the appropriate coping skills. They have not figured out, what was the draw to drugs in the first place, or why they continue to maintain that lifestyle. Again, I'm fully aware that part of this presentation is done in hopes that this civic group, the Rotarians, can have something they can get behind and go out and champion for. And if I could leave or impart anything, I would say be an advocate for smart policy. Not policy that wastes our tax dollars, and just not the best use of our tax dollars, because we're stuck or we don't want to try to figure out what's the best way to assist an individual who have a substance abuse, as opposed to just warehousing them, locking them up. We can do better, and I believe in our ability to do so, and I believe that we have legislators who are willing, especially if they receive some telephone calls. They will be willing to advocate for the right laws and the right policies and the right funding to programs such as drug courts. But we operate in Polk County. We operate a drug court, and it is a specialized court docket. So we assign a duty judge who oversees the drug court, and they do that for a period of time, usually a year or two, and then we'll rotate in another judge. But the program targets criminal defendants and offenders who have shown or have been arrested, rather, for a substance abuse related offense, nonviolent, and we will allow them into the program. And essentially the difference between a drug court program and a regular sentencing is that this individual comes back before the judge on multiple occasions. As you can imagine, the traditional model is a person appears before the judge on some charges or charge. They are sentenced to incarceration, whether it be at the local jail or in prison, and they go off. And they serve that time, and then they're released, and they go forward. In the drug court model, the person is remains in the community by and large, and is placed under supervision. So there is a caseworker that works with that individual. That caseworker provides the judge with a status update of how the person is performing while in the community. The individual comes before the judge. The judge hears the good or negative report about the individual, and the judge either metes out praise and accolades upon the person, or imposes what we call a graduated sanction, a progressive discipline, if you will, model, as opposed to just handing out a sentence and letting the person go off. So it's not as long in terms of what the sanction might be, in terms of if the judge does have them spend some time in jail or prison. It's not usually as long, and then that person comes back before the judge, and the program continues. The person receives counseling and other things to kind of help them out with life skills and developing just coping mechanisms. So that's the aim of this, is to really bring a very humanistic approach to the substance abuse challenges that plague our society. So we're very, very proud to be operating a drug court here in Polk County. We are one of 3,000 drug courts that are in operation today, and 3,000 that's nationally. The wonderful thing about drug courts is that they have been shown statistically to be effective at what they do. I'll give you some examples from a report from the Department of Justice concerning drug courts. Participants who went through the drug court programs are reported to be involved in less criminal activity. 40% versus 53% had fewer rearrests compared to comparable offenders. Participants reported less drug use, 56% versus 76%, and were less likely to test positive than their counterparts who did not go through a drug court program. And finally, treatment investment costs were higher for participants, but with less recidivism. So drug court saved an average of $5,680 per offender overall. And you might say, well, that doesn't seem like a whole lot in terms of bang for the buck or this new approach. But I can assure you, when you have a program that is community-based, anytime you can keep people in the community, you keep that cost low, you can able to reinvest those dollars in other areas. It is definitely a win-win-win for our society. I don't want to take too much time, and I want to leave room or time for questions, because I want to speak directly to the questions that may exist. So I'm going to wrap up my comments with that. Again, this is a program that is well worth its weight in gold. It's been proven here in Iowa and nationally. And again, it is truly effective way, without compromising public safety. It is an effective way of striking that balance between incarcerating those people who truly are a threat to society, and having a more humanitarian approach to assisting people who we may be disappointed in, meaning we're disappointed in their substance abuse, but they're not truly otherwise a threat to society. So it's a nice balance, again, that does not compromise public safety, and is more of a humanitarian approach, does try to help people along the way. So with that, I'll
everyone, I'm Jen Pearson, Chief Executive Officer at UCS Healthcare, and I want to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about our nonprofit agency that works across the state of Iowa to deliver a broad array of healthcare services in a safe, respectful, and accessible environment. UCS Healthcare is the place for comprehensive healthcare services. From mental health therapy, medical care, psychiatric services, substance use disorder therapy, and medication-assisted treatment for opioid and alcohol addiction, we focus on treating the whole person, mind and body, to help each individual achieve lifelong well-being. UCS was incorporated in 1997 and employs more than 100 professionals in 14 locations across Iowa. Our staff includes certified counselors, licensed mental health therapists, clinical psychologists, physicians, nurses, pharmacists, psychiatrists, and patient services specialists, all here to welcome all people. Everyone on our team shares a commitment to respect patients as individuals without judgment. We believe every life is important and welcome people from every background. We encourage you to visit us online to learn more about our wide range of services and how to find the help you need.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christopher Marks. I'm a licensed mental health counselor here in the state of Iowa. I work for Lifeworks Incorporated. First of all, I'd just like to say a quick thank you to Mia and Tamara, Dale, all the other panelists, and to all the Rotarians for inviting me to speak tonight. Lifeworks has 2 offices here in the Des Moines and Ankeny area. About 60 therapists altogether of different kinds, serving the community, and it's an honor to be invited to speak here. The topic of alcoholism and addiction, I've been asked to kind of focus on the youth and more of the effect on the family. And so alcoholism and addiction is nicknamed the family disease for a reason. What we're dealing with here is a deadly disease, and it will kill you. It will grab a hold of you, the individual that's afflicted, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, and it will kill you. But what we also know is that it's nicknamed the family disease because it will affect anybody and everybody that's ever tried to love the alcoholic or the addict. At Lifeworks, our aim is to treat the entire family, not just the addict or the alcoholic. The impact and effect on the family unit is severe and deep. The wound and wounds can go on for generations. And what we see is, from a psychological standpoint, the old nature versus nurture, is this just a genetic thing that gets cast on from generation to generation? Well, we think it's both. We know that alcoholism and addiction causes trauma to the family, to the children that are in the family, and that this can very well lead to future addiction and alcoholism as well. And so, the impact of, and I'm talking about the problem to begin with, but the impact on the home life, right? The reason why we call it the family disease, the yelling, the screaming, the fighting, the domestic violence, police and the legal issues, the divorce, the health issues, and even death we see as part of the consequences of alcoholism and addiction. And I hope tonight to give you a brief, few minutes of what it's like to sit in my chair in my office and hear their stories, hear the impact and the devastation, and then also get to the healing and how do we help. So I thought panelists before did a great job of laying out all the statistics. I was joking with Dale before we started that I'm a professional listener. I'm not a professional speaker, and so I feel it's just an honor and privilege to be here and to see how up to date everybody is on what's going on in our community. what is the, what's the impact? Mom or dad is an alcoholic or an addict. What we often find is the trickle-down effect is codependency. And then on the children, what we find is depression and anxiety. A lot of depression and anxiety. And then, of course, the nurture part of it is they normalize what they see and hear every day. And so we get this generational thing that's going on. And, they end up using themselves. These young kids are used today. We saw some of the statistics that Dale showed us before. And the impacts of drug use and alcohol on the young mind can be devastating, right? We know that it leads to anxiety and depression, but studies tell us that, it's the neurological development is delayed, development of the brain is disturbed. And we also know that if they have predispositions to mental health issues, that this can trigger it, right? Even smoking marijuana, we know, can lead to, triggering those predispositions to psychosis and even schizophrenia. And so, no joking matter, this thing is. I learned a few things today, too, I knew that alcohol kills more than any other drug. I knew that. It was the most deadly. It's also the most deadly to withdraw from as well. When you're withdrawing from heroin, you just think you're going to die. Right? It just feels like you're going to die. Alcohol can actually kill you. The gateway drugs, vaping, I see a lot of that in my office. What I would say about, smoking marijuana, drinking alcohol, vaping for our youth, as this trickles down from mom or dad that began the using process, and we start this kind of cyclical effect in the family, is that these are the gateway drugs, is that I would call them, that start. I know it's an age-old term, but it's so true, right? I would compare it to how we've learned in the mental health community to take when somebody talks about self-harm or suicide, how seriously we take that. That's no joke if somebody says something like that they're interested in hurting themselves. And when you hear about your teenager or your middle schooler vaping or smoking pot or drinking with his buddies, it's no joke. And what I would say is take that just as seriously. And, of course, what I'm encouraging you to do is to come to counseling. That was a quick 7 minutes. Wow. So, what's the solution? Boy, counseling. I would say for the adults, of course, there is treatment and treatment centers. We know that treatment does a good job of separating the addict or the alcoholic, getting them clean and sober. But that's just the beginning, right? I'm a big believer in counseling, and I'm also a big believer in the 12-step programs and encouraging people to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, to go to Al-Anon, for the youths to go to Alateen, to gain that self-awareness, to start to build that sober support program. What we know is that they needed that the alcoholic or the addict needs a design for living that's different from what they've been doing, a spiritual change, a psychic change, a spiritual experience. We know that they need to address the trauma that's been in their past, that maybe they started with, self-medicating, and it triggered that addiction, the allergy of the body, and the obsession of the mind. I'm a big believer in the 12-step programs. I look at our counseling as trying to be a support to that support, and address any underlying issues that may be still lingering from their use. At Lifeworks we have counseling, individual counseling, talk therapy, play therapy for little ones if they're, of the family. EMDR. BHIS is Behavioral Health Intervention Services, which is we'll come to the house. We'll have a counselor come out to the house, actually interact with your family in their environment as you start to try to heal the family. We have school-based counselors, so the kids don't have to leave school and miss time away from school as much time. They can just go to the counselor's office. And we do family counseling as well, marriage and family counseling. Again, I just wanted, to encourage everybody to take the seriousness of this, how addiction and alcoholism affects the entire family, and to take the seriousness, take it very seriously if your teenager, your middle schooler, starts talking about vaping or smoking pot or drinking alcohol. Get them to counseling and help them start the connections to their healing. Again, I look forward to answering any questions that Rotarians may have. I thank you again for the invitation to speak and all of your service to families and to our community. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jeff Lamberti. I am the chair of Bridges of Iowa. Bridges of Iowa is a long-term substance abuse treatment program that's operated in central Iowa for over 20 years and was started by my parents, Don and Charlene Lamberti. We know that long-term treatment, which is what Bridges of Iowa is, works. We have a 20-year track record, and as a result of that, we've helped over 2,000 Iowans return to society as productive citizens. Now, with what we've seen and gone through with this pandemic, we know that the need for substance abuse treatment and effective substance abuse treatment is only going to grow. Because of that, we're asking for your assistance and your financial help. Thank you.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Steve Quirk. I'm Associate Vice President at Lutheran Services in Iowa. And I want to make a few quick disclaimers. At the start of the pandemic, I got motivated to adopt a Siberian Husky. And yesterday, as I was reviewing court depositions, my Husky saw snow for the first time. And I thought, the deposition reading is pretty awful. And some of the things that we have to read are pretty awful. So to see the puppy play. So I want to have that image out there for you. Also, thank the sheriff and Dale. Could you throw more data up there next time? My word, that was awesome. And then the Christophers, you guys gave great presentations. When Tamara reached out to me to do this, I'll admit to her, and I'm going to thank you later though, but this is a trauma trigger for a lot of us that are surrounded by this stuff. When all day, every day, you're dealing with people that are hurt or hurting, just now having to prepare a few thoughts to share with our Rotarian friends, it's a trauma trigger. So one of the things you have to do is get mechanical. The other thing is seek help. I'm 51 years old, and I'm so proud to share with you folks that I started seeing a therapist right after grad school. And what prompted that, Sheriff, is I saw a dead person. I saw a dude in northern Wisconsin in a big truck with dualies run head into a guy in a convertible. And I saw a dead person. And I was really encouraged at that time to get help, and I've stuck with it. So part of my message to you folks now is if you need help, not just with substance abuse, but with mental health issues, seek help. Kind of the theme I'd share too is we have to be courageous. Dale, you kind of referenced this, that if you see something, say something. I mean, just have the courage. And if you have a buddies group and you're drinking too much beer and someone is about to drive, take their keys. Don't ask for them. You take them. If you're drinking wine with your friends and reading books and someone's too drunk, take their keys. If you ruin a relationship, oh well, you maybe saved a life. And I would take that any day. So please, I really challenge you. My theme throughout my comments is if you see something, say something. As Rotarians, we are generous, and we are loving, and we are caring. Des Moines AM Rotary, where I go, is obnoxiously, amazingly entertaining, and occasionally very, very serious. But they're very good, loving folks, and I love the invocation part and the Pledge of Allegiance a lot. The four-way test is important at the end, but I love the start of the meetings and good sergeant programs. I want to represent my Rotary because they're my friends. I also want to represent an entire system. So I'll talk a little bit about Lutheran services in Iowa, but I want to help you understand the entire kid system in less than 5 minutes now. I feel so blessed to be an advocate for children because there's a whole lot of kids who've got no strong advocate. They don't have a loving parent. They don't have an older sibling. They probably don't have an extended family. So someone's got to reach out and help and advocate. I spend a lot of time in court all across the state. We have some beautiful courthouses, and it's a joy to be a part of this process, but it's devastating because there's this kid's life on the line. And there's so many moving parts, and I'll share a little bit more about that experience here in a moment. And then I also want to just acknowledge my parents, both deceased here within the past couple of years. My dad was a minister and a college professor, and my mom was a social worker. So when people ask me, like, why do you want this miserable job? Why do you want to be in this painful industry? It's because it's like mom and dad made me. They trained me to do this work. I grew up on the Lower East Side of Waterloo, and we had a huge house that always had, in addition to me and my 3 older brothers and typically 2 dogs, always had extra people in it. People from church, people that my mother ran across. And to me, that message was always reach out and help. And I try to carry forward, too, that since so many of the kids that we deal with just don't have that home, they don't have Gail Quirk's house to go to, and they don't have a place that's safe, that we have to create that place for them. The comments I'll make about Lutheran services in Iowa, it's a joy to work for a Christian organization. It's very clear by the first word. I'm a Christian. I have a beautiful set of crosses. I actually collect them. I've got a great tattoo on this bicep with a cross, and it's really a privilege to be with a company where you don't have to be careful with your faith. You can just expose it very clearly, and I feel like this is a Christian mission for me. We've got about 800 employees, many social workers. I have a team of doctors and social workers and clinicians that work for me. And the programs that I want to share too are residential programs in Waverly and Ames. And then there's other agencies that have similar programs like this in other communities. But what we run are what's called PMICs, Psychiatric Medical Institution for Children. So imagine a facility that looks like a hospital, but deals just with children's mental health. We also have what's called qualified residential treatment programs. So these are kids who are adjudicated delinquent or child in need of assistance, so they've been removed. Law enforcement has helped us, and attorneys and social workers have helped us remove the child from their home. And then we also have an emergency shelter. And I appreciate the sheriff's comments about transporting kids because, in essence, and law enforcement doesn't like this, but they are our fleet of drivers. They are typically who's bringing children to our campuses. We also have a program called Family Centered Services where we're in the home. And this is where there's very, very close to getting a removal, and we're in the home. So we have more eyes on kids. And our social workers, of course, are all mandatory reporters. The other thing I'm just super proud of is we have churches at both of our campuses. And we don't force the kids to go to service, but they're beautiful churches, and we have some serious good musicians, and sometimes it's just helping kids realize that is an option if they don't have a faith journey of their own. Now it's going to get a little bit more uncomfortable because I want to share with you the things I'm seeing. The frequency of child abuse and sexual abuse and physical violence. How often is substance abuse involved? Easy answer. Not just your data showed it. It's always involved. It's not in our human nature to beat the crap out of our kids. You either have a mental health problem or a substance abuse problem or both, right? And that's scary and dangerous. We're seeing more and more sexual abuse, familial typically. And then we also do, the chief acknowledged, a reminder of I-35 and I-80. We do rescue lots of children that are victims of domestic minor sex trafficking, and we've got a special program in Waverly to tend to those kids. You saw a whole bunch of data with Dale's comments about what kind of drugs we're seeing. We are seeing lots of cocaine and methamphetamine, lots of opioids and heroin. And this whole idea that we're putting large animal tranquilizers in drugs and humans are ingesting them with carfentanil and fentanyl. A human is knowingly taking a substance that is used in the wild to deal with elephants and huge critters. And they're taking it and putting it in their body. That's a mental health problem and obviously a substance abuse problem as well. Alcohol, it's just over the top that people are doing alcohol on top of all those other things. I would share with you too, typically the parents don't come to court because it's embarrassing. They're being shamed. They're being told that you're failing as a parent and we're going to do something with your child. We're going to remove your child and put them in foster care or in one of the residential programs that I described. To create a really disgusting image that I have had to suffer through time and time again, Sheriff, is there anything stinkier than a human who's on methamphetamine, who reeks of alcohol and smokes? That's about as stinky as you can get. It's terrible. And oftentimes, parents even come to court recently abusing. And I often follow parents out of court, and they go straight to their car, and they get right after it, and then they drive. And then I have that flashback of seeing a dead old guy in a Mercedes that got crushed by a huge truck. The other thing I'd share too, that juvenile court judges have got a really tough job because they're basically doing a huge value judgment on another human's behavior to another human. And many of the judges depend on social workers and attorneys and therapists for their information. A few more comments, then I too want to get to questions, and I see we're getting tight on time. Obviously, using substances is a problem. But Dale, I think you mentioned, or maybe Sheriff, you did, but the residual of substances in a home. You know, if you're smoking meth in your home, there's meth on your carpet, on your tables, in your chairs. If you're smoking marijuana, same thing. If you have alcohol in the house, same thing. So all that does have a trickle effect. I think, Christopher, you could have spoke for hours about all the collateral damage of just having those substances in the home. Kids are curious creatures. And we also see a lot of kids that are doing random pharmaceuticals. So I'm so excited that that program's this weekend to turn in that stuff, because we have a whole bunch of kids that end up coming to us after getting out of the hospital because they grab 5 different random pills from maybe a friend or from their parents' medicine cabinet, and they take them. And obviously that's a dangerous proposition. So if you see something, say something. I challenge Rotarians to have the courage to ask somebody if they need help. Have the courage and the compassion and the love. If you see someone, your neighbor, someone at church, a colleague, ask them if they need help. And what a brave and compassionate way as a human to show that I care about you. And even if you don't know the person very well, it's okay to go to someone and ask them for help. If you see something, say something. A lot of folks don't know, but many of the convenience stores have special trainings on how to deal with kids in distress. So if you pay attention, there's lots of ways that the cashier, they say hi to you, right? Right away before you even get in the door. But there's lots of other things going on. So if you find yourself at a grocery store or a convenience store and you see a kid in distress, tell the cashier, call the police. That's okay thing to do. This Good Samaritan thing is a real deal. So why not be brave enough to help? I think that the challenge, though, is, do we want to be that person that tries to get in front of an adult who's clearly endangering their child? Do we want to take that risk physically? You have to be really smart and careful. But you can do real-time conflict resolution. What I like to do when I see something distressful is just kind of interrupt that flow. If the parent is being too physically rough with the child, I just interrupt that flow. Maybe I try to stand in between them. Maybe I just follow them. Maybe I just look at them. I'm not the biggest guy in the world, but I just look at them. And I try to look really, really mean. And sometimes that works. But sometimes you just have to be the intervention in that violence. I want Rotarians to be courageous and help these programs too. I know we've got another video. We do have one more video that I think we're going to show. And these programs depend on philanthropy. Insurance doesn't cover everything as well as it has to. So Rotarians, please give and be generous. Please have the courage to make donations to these organizations of things in addition to money, like your time and contributions. I also want to challenge all of you in your own space or with the help of a spouse. Ask yourself, do you need help? You know if you're an alcoholic. You know if you're spending too much money on drugs. You know. And there's denial, and there's lots of other things going on there, right? But you know if you're messed up, and there's ways to get help. And I would really challenge us all to be courageous in your own comfort, in your own space, however you feel like you can courage up and say, I need help, and then go get it. I think the House of Mercy video is next, and it's a powerful, powerful program. And again, I just want to thank these guys. The sheriff decided not to go with the team haircut, but he did create a nice image earlier. You had a beard and long hair when you were undercover. You should get rid of that hair, Sheriff. Then you'll fit in with the rest of the panel. Anyway, Rotarians, thank you for your time. Let's fire up some questions, and hopefully we can provide some answers. But mad props to all you Rotarians that dialed in to watch this tonight. I know that's lots of other things you could be doing. So I don't know if we're going to be able to see what kind of attendance we had, but I hope it's a ton. Y'all have a good evening.
My name's Katie, and I've been a drug addict since I was 12 years old, and drugs almost took out my life. I went to the emergency room. My heart was failing from the methamphetamine use, and my liver was failing from the alcohol use.
She was in very poor physical health condition. I don't even think that she realized how ill she was.
And they didn't even know if I was going to make it through the night when I was in the ICU. That's when they offered me House of Mercy. This time was different because I knew it was definitely, I hit rock bottom this time. It was my last chance to live. I pretty much had to say goodbye to my kids. It crushed me to watch their little faces in fear of losing their mom, you know? That was the hard part. I knew right then I had to change everything I was doing, or I was gonna leave Emily with no mom. House of Mercy completely changed my life. They transformed me from an isolated drug addict into a self-sufficient mom, going to school, living life.
So I really am able to see Katie's life and the lives of so many clients transform through these services, and it really helps see in her story how somebody can accomplish their goals and dreams through that hard work and through the treatment process. And what's so powerful about Katie's story is that it gives us all hope that people can change and people can recover.
The word mercy to me means miracle. After being a House of Mercy, I'm actually living life. I have hope, I have faith, I have goals. I'm in the RN program at Mercy College of Health Sciences. I want to be a nurse, just like the one that helped me. My whole Mercy experience changed my life. I started off at Mercy Hospital, almost dying in the ICU, going into House of Mercy for rehabilitation. Now I'm at Mercy College of Health Sciences, and I start clinicals at Mercy One Des Moines Medical Center. I've made the full circle.
We're able to truly individualize treatment for our clients, and as soon as they walk in the door, we ask them, what are your goals and how can we help you meet those goals? We're a part of Mercy One system and we work together, and Katie's story represents just this beautiful circle of how different touch points can access services and communicate and give warm handoffs, and we were so glad to be a part of that in Katie's journey. I couldn't be more proud of her and sharing this example of how this happens every single day in our doors.
And welcome back. We're now going to go to the question and answer segment of the evening. And thanks for the questions that have been sent in via the chat so far. The first question here, I hope I understand this, so I'm going to ask if either of the Christophers could maybe answer this. The question is, what do you think of a court-ordered medication adherence capsule that unequivocally tracks ingestion for the oral capsule, tablet, or collar? So is that to like check to see if somebody is taking the medication?
I'm going to step out on a limb and assume that the question is kind of making reference to like antabuse, and antabuse is just simply it's a drug that you can take that if once you've ingested it, if you were to imbibe in alcohol or illicit drugs, it would make you physically ill. Of course, it is something that is used, sometimes. What do I think about it? I think, of course, the courts have to do that with caution, because you just don't know a person's medical history or how Different substances may interact with their body, and the last thing you want to do is, in your effort to help someone, you actually make them ill. And so I think you have to be really, really careful about that, even though those substances exist.
The other, Christopher?
On the other, I always get worried when I hear court mandated. I'd much rather, of course, have the individual want to willingly participate in something like that. That would always be better in my view. And on the other, if that meant an abuse or something like that, I followed along those same lines. But if they were talking about for mental health purposes, to make sure that they were taking their medication, perhaps I think maybe that's what the question might have been asking. I don't have any I've not heard of that yet so far. I don't have much knowledge on that, but it's an interesting concept for sure.
Okay. You want to hold that right there? I'm getting questions on my phone here. So, second question for the panel. I noticed in one of the statistical graphs that there was a significant decrease in child abuse in the years close to 2008. What caused this drop? So, do you want to hand it to Stephen and see if Stephen has some insight?
I don't remember that slide. But one of the things that's really interesting is that from a public policy perspective, and the courts have got a strong impact in making really that next final determination of whether it's a child in need of assistance or a child who's adjudicated delinquent. That was also the change of a major DHS policy, Department of Human Services. I would tell you that when the kids were off this summer and there was not a whole lot of eyes on them, so we're expecting a huge increase in child abuse now because we have mandatory reporters in the schools. So a change of policy, a change of judicial behavior, maybe luck, but we're bracing for a big storm of more kids in our care.
Thank you, Stephen. And then Christopher, I think this next one's for you, but we'll see if anybody else wants to contribute. Question, the drug naloxone seems to be very effective with addiction. Does this drug work just short term? What are the effects to help people with their addiction long term? So is that yours?
Well, I can say I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical doctor. I don't want to speak out of turn. Naloxone, what I know of it for decreasing urges. I guess I would more want to answer questions on psychological issues, mental health issues. I certainly do work with the psychiatrists in the medical community, but just don't know enough about it that I'd like to speak on.
Well, I'm not a doctor either, but I will tell you from what I've heard doctors say, naloxone is very temporary. It's not a treatment for the addiction so much as it's to bring you out of the deep sleep. So it's really not an addiction treatment. It's a coma treatment. That's probably not the right medical term. But what I've heard from EMS personnel is that once they bring someone out with naloxone, they need to get them to the hospital quickly because there's always the chance for relapse and for other things to take place. So relapse is a real threat, and so naloxone is just the beginning. Then you're looking at other medical treatment and then eventually behavioral health treatment. Okay, so next up, professionals of all types, examples would be lawyers and dentists, can suffer substance abuse. What are some warning signs to be on watch for? Who would like to tackle that to start with? Warning signs. It's yours again, Christopher.
Warning signs, can certainly be irritability, rapidly changing moods, loss of job in our youth, dropping in the grades, changing of social circles and social friends, money issues. I would say that those are some pretty typical warning signs.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. We'll move on to the next question, which is there statistical differences, or are there statistical differences of substance abuse impacts in minority communities, and are treatments or programs any different for those in minority communities? All right, we'll go with Stephen first.
In our treatment facilities, our ethnic blend is pretty similar to what Iowa is. Oops, sorry about that. It's about 90% Caucasian. One of the reasons, though, is whether it's an insurability issue or an access or parental support, to be in treatment, and Christopher mentioned this several times, you need family support for it to be effective. And I do also think that in some ethnic groups, maybe it's just more normalized to use drugs and to have mental health problems. I can't speak to whether that's the case, but I can speak to most of our census does follow along the Iowa census, and I think we're at like 90% Caucasian or something like that.
I would just add that we do know that we do have disproportionate minority contact with the justice system in many areas, and that includes in areas of drug offenses. So that's one of the things that I believe Governor Reynolds' Focus Committee has been looking at as part of a justice reform review, and I know other groups are looking at it too. So I think you're gonna see some discussions, and I think actions probably come next legislative session. I'm not a legislator, but I've talked to a few, and I think you're gonna see some proposals to try to deal with the justice end of that, as far as use and treatment. Generally speaking, I don't know that there's a big difference. Certainly there would be, depending on where the supply lines might be and areas of influence. But it typically, I don't know that it necessarily falls along racial lines. Used to be maybe urban and rural, but that's no longer the case because of things like the internet and methamphetamine. Next question, Sheriff, is for you, so I'm going to get you ready. If someone were to have a concern or observation but don't think it warrants a 911 call, urgent call, what should they do?
Well, we have an administrative number that they can call, and it's 286-3333. Pretty much every law enforcement agency does have an administrative number. But feel free to call that, then the sheriff will route your call. Our dispatch center, our communication center will route your call wherever it needs to go. So once they get on there, if you're calling from West Des Moines and you need to talk to West Des Moines, they'll transfer you to West Des Moines, or they'll take your information and get you hooked up with someone who can call you back. So we will be glad to facilitate that anywhere in Polk County, and we actually get calls from all over the county. So we do dispatch for 15 different agencies. So we get a lot of calls that you think you're calling your city and it's actually coming to Polk County, and we're sending your police car or your ambulance, fire truck to your house. So feel free to give us a call.
Thank you, Sheriff. And Christopher, I think the next one is a drug court question, so I'm going to hand this mic to you. If someone's assigned for 12 to 14 months, is that enough time to follow up and have a real chance to deliver positive results? I think I'm going to assume that's referring to the length of a drug court treatment program for those who participate. Is it enough?
Wow, I would say it depends largely on the individual, but even in saying that, you'd like to see as much wraparound services, as much support for as long as possible. But I also realize that because resources are often scarce, or they're tight, that you can't do it. You can't do it forever. Although you really would like to get that person connected with the resources that could help sustain them, because you never know. The thing about it is, life is such a stressor on you, and to say that 14 months, 12 months is enough. What happens in that 15 months when that person is in the dead quiet of their own bedroom with no other support, or a telephone number to call, or a person that they can call and just lean on? you just wish that in an ideal world that there would be resources aplenty for substance abuse and for individuals who struggle with that. And for many, it is a lifelong struggle. It's not just 12 months and then I'm cured, I'm well, it's over, it's in my past, and I'm done with it. So I know that's not really a definitive answer, but I mean, I would say it's not enough, and I wish there was more, but it's all that we have just about in terms of exhausting resources, unfortunately.
Thanks, Christopher. And other Christopher Marks, would you like to add?
Sure. I guess I would just say that
it's why I mentioned in my talk, I'm a big believer in drug court, but also in Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, because it is a lifetime battle. Some of the mindsets when I talked about having a kind of a design for living that we talk about in counseling with the addict and the alcoholic is this idea that their sobriety has to mean everything. It has to come first, because without it, they have nothing. Whatever it is that we have the saying that, the first thing that you put in front of your sobriety will be the second thing that you lose, right? Because, it's just an ongoing battle that they'll have for the rest of their life, in my opinion. It's not something that you can be cured or be done and over with. And so, as awesome as drug court is, at some point, whether it's 12 months or 24 months or what, at some point it's going to end, and they need that sober support system. They need that sponsor that they can call in the middle of the night and say, I'm struggling, right? That guy or that gal that will pick up the phone. And so it's why I'm such a big proponent of feeling like I'm a support to that program and try to encourage it as often as I can. So that answers the question.
I'm going to let you keep that because I think the next question is for you too.
Okay.
You're a popular guy.
okay.
But I will throw in that we are challenged on our treatment capacities in the state of Iowa, especially when it comes to residential treatment. And I don't think that's a secret. In many cases, in many communities, drug court will give you the longest term of treatment, outpatient treatment, that you probably are going to get. So I've actually suggested to some families who call our office looking for help for a loved one to contact the county attorney, and if you have a drug court in your community, see if you could get someone placed in drug court, because you may get more help there than you, in terms of volume or length, than you would get somewhere else. That's a very general statement, but yeah, it does vary, it seems, and for some, outpatient will work. For others, it requires residential. Enter in insurance and the cost, and that's the battle that our elected leaders have to engage in as far as what are priorities and what's ahead of what. So the last question we have, I believe, we have two more. Sorry about that. Okay, unfrozen here. Christopher, it was mentioned that the 12-step process is an effective therapy, especially with alcoholism. Can you share why you feel that this is the case?
Fair question. I would say that I wouldn't call it necessarily a therapy. I would call it a 12-step program. I would call it a spiritual program. I think that therapy is an addition to that. In terms of addressing trauma and depression issues, anxiety issues. The techniques are completely different. I do believe in the 12-step process. I have some, personal experience with it. I don't want to get too personal, but I grew up in a household that my father was an alcoholic, and when he passed away in 2015, he died with 25 years of sobriety. And so I saw the impact directly that Alcoholics Anonymous, Al-Anon, Alateen can have on a family and to help it heal. Obviously, I'm a huge believer in counseling and therapy and drug court and treatment programs. But this is that sober support system that so many alcoholics and addicts need, that ongoing sober support system. They relate to each other. They become lifelong friends. There's many, many, many positive things about it. I can't say enough about it. And most good treatment centers that I know, most drug courts that I know, most counselors that I know, will all work in conjunction with the 12-step programs, most of them. So anyway, I hope that answers the question.
Me too. Do we have time for one more quick one? Okay, last question goes to the sheriff. The question for you, Sheriff, is does Iowa receive special funding from the federal government for drug enforcement because of the nexus of Interstates 35 and 80?
Well, we do receive money from the federal government for enforcement and treatment. So on both sides of that. And I don't know if it's because of 3580 because we are the hub. I don't think that really has anything in that. Dale, you might be able to answer that more, but we do apply for the grants. And with those grants, there's a performance that needs to be done, and we do a good job of performing as far as treatment goes and as far as arrests go. So as long as we continue to be productive and do a good job, we hope we will continue to get JAG money and keep our operation up and running. So I can't tell you how they do it, and I can't tell you some of the whether they do any geographical barriers or not. I don't know on that. So, but I know that there is a performance evaluation done, and we make sure that we meet or exceed that so that we can apply every year.
And I'll just add that you're right, Sheriff. Some of the federal funding that comes to Iowa for drug enforcement or for other efforts, non-enforcement, some of it's formula, so it's based on population and crime rates, and some of it is more needs-based with very targeted needs. So with methamphetamine being a big drug issue in our state, we've received some special funding for that over the years, so it depends. We got some more questions. We don't have time for them, so I think we'll try to answer those offline if we can. And I want you to know that the slides that I showed earlier are available. And with that, I'll try to be responsive to follow-ups. But for now, I'm going to turn it back over to Tamara. And thank you again for attending, and thanks to Rotary for having us tonight.
Well, thank you. I have to tell you, I work in the world of creativity and marketing every day. And tonight, reflecting back, and as I was listening to each of you, it just humbles me because the work you all do on a daily basis, I just can't imagine. I mean, you're dealing with people's lives every day, and I don't have that concept on a daily basis. So on behalf of Rotarians and all of you listening today, Dale, Sheriff Snyder, our Christophers, and Stephen, thank you so much for sharing your time tonight and your valuable stories. As Steve mentioned earlier, we really want to help these nonprofits in our community that are dealing with substance abuse. So we really plea for you to open your checkbooks tonight, donate online, and let us help the nonprofits in our local community that are dealing with these issues every day. If you're interested in Rotary, we'd love to have you as a member as well. Our email is rotarycivitas@gmail.com. Pretty easy to remember, rotarycivitas@gmail.com. Just email us if you're interested in learning more about Rotary, how you can donate, how you can be involved. And with that, we will close this evening in Rotary fashion with our four-way test that will be behind me here on the screen. We'll wait for it to come up. And so, it's on? All right. So first, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you for joining us this evening.